Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hard for those of you that are new. And today I'll be breaking down the Sunday main slate here on DraftKings. This is going to be a final core play video. It's going to be a quick breakdown just for this slate. If you guys want a more in depth breakdown, I already did that a few days ago. So make sure to check that out on my channel. Do appreciate all the love and support. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And let's get right into this core play video, this breakdown. Starting off here for injuries, quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson's out. So Cooper Rush will be QB1 there for the Ravens. Running back situation, Bucky Irvin is out, so Rashad White will be running back one. Sean Tucker will be running back two. We'll go over that in a second. Chuba is out, so Rico Dowdle will be the running back one there. Trey Benson is out, so for the Cardinals, they'll do it like a running back by committee. They have like two or three guys they'll use. Braylon Allen's out, so obviously that's more of an upside there for Brees Hall. Tracy Jr. is doubtful, so obviously more upside for Cam Scattaboo. And that is it. Tajay Spears, he might be back. He might be making his appearance. So that's a little bit of a hit to Tony Pollard's upside, but I still think it's fine. In terms of wide receivers, um, Tyreek Hill is out. So Jalen Waddle is going to be that wide receiver one. Malik Washington, wide receiver two. Some value there for the Dolphins. Terry McLaurin is out, so we'll still get Debo Samuel as wide receiver one. Calvin Ridley is questionable. Alec Pierce is still out, and that's really it. Nothing too crazy in terms of wide receivers. And then for tight end situation, the big news is Brock Bowers is they haven't put him as doubtful yet, but it looks like he should be doubtful and that he probably won't be able to play this week. And so we'll go with that news once we get to the tight end situation. But heading back to quarterbacks, as I mentioned in my kind of early look breakdown video from a few days ago, I think I'm just going to stick with the kind of the chalky plays right now in terms of Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, and Justin Fields is kind of my favorites quarterbacks. They're all very chalky, but for good reason. They're all in fantastic matchups. They all have a lot of people we can stack with them. So I'm going to stick with Fields and get different with few different players or get different a few other ways. So I think we just lock in Fields. Moving on to the running back situation, you can go with some of the guys at the top. I still think Devon Achan makes the most sense. He's the cheapest of the top backs, but they all have similar upside. He should see a massive target share out of the backfield, as we've seen 2 games this season. We've gotten for more than 9 targets from that backfield. Obviously, no Tyreek Hill. He just looks like a great play there against Carolina, so we'll throw him in there. I also really like Jameer Gibbs, but as I said, for this running back situation, there is no Chuba. So if you want to get down to Rico Dowdle right here, uh, great matchup here against Miami. He's 4,300. As you can see, he was already getting some decent work the past 3 weeks with no Chuba. Not that there's no Chuba. 4,300 for starting running back in that position against Miami looks really really good. And the other guy we'll mention, as I said, Rashad White taking over there. No Bucky Irving. We've seen in kind of the past few seasons that it's a really viable or it's a really good running back one role there for the Bucks. They like to check it down a bunch, as you can see. Week 4 there, he had 5 targets, 4 catches for 29 yards. Should see him, get 10 to 15 rush attempts. I will say, if you want to get a little bit riskier, especially with these running backs, if you do want to play value play on the Tampa Bay Bucks, as we've seen from last year, Sean Tucker does have upside. They will utilize him. They do love utilizing the 2 running back set there for Tampa Bay. So you can definitely look to him. It's definitely risky, but at flat minimum price 4,000, he should see, I'd say, close to 6, 7 rushing attempts, maybe more if he's doing well, and maybe more if Rashad White is not doing the best. So there is that news there. But we'll go ahead and just throw Rashad White in here at 4,700. And great matchup, or not the best matchup going against Seattle, but still very very cheap for his expected usage and role. For the rest of the running backs here, as I mentioned, I really like Saquon as a bounce back spot, even though it's not the best situation against Denver. Jameer Gibbs looks absolutely fantastic there against Cincinnati. So if you want to pivot off a chalky Devon Achan, you can definitely go to Jameer Gibbs, who's basically the same play, just a little bit more expensive. And obviously, Jonathan Taylor, absolute workhorse, absolute stud. Um, Going against the Raiders, you can definitely do that if you want to. But I think for now, I'm going to stick kind of with the 2 main chalky running backs or excuse me, the 3 main chalky running backs and just get different with wide receivers. That's really it. You can definitely look to Omari and Hampton. You can go out on a little bit more. Scadaboo and Kamara look really, really solid. As I mentioned, Brees Hall, I really like him at 5,600. I wouldn't be, I'd be fine with taking Rashad White out and maybe going to Brees Hall or taking out a Dottle and going to Brees Hall. There's just a lot to like here in terms of running back situation for this slate. So you don't necessarily have to go to the cheap kind of chalky running backs, but you can. But as I mentioned, Brees Hall 5,600 looks fantastic. William Marks is making a move there for that backfield. Monty looks great there. If you're not going to Jameer Gibbs, Monty looks great in a matchup here against Cincinnati. Not seeing a huge workload, but they're just super efficient. He seems to score, every single game, so he looks really good there. And that's really it for the running back situation. Kind of go with the chalk there, chalk quarterback, and just get to with the wide receivers. In terms of wide receivers, I really like Jamar Chase in a bounce back spot here, and I think that'd be a solid bring back if you do want to do a Jared Goff stack, which is once again very viable for this slate, just because of that matchup against the Bengals. And the Bengals overall are just obviously terrible, as we know. Moving on down a little bit more, JSN is going to be super chalky there against Tampa Bay. I don't mind going a little bit different, going to Ibuka on the other side. Nico Collins drawing a lot of ownership makes a lot of sense going against the terrible, terrible Baltimore defense. He looks fantastic there at 6,800. So I think these are going to be the core plays. I know it's nothing too crazy, nothing too wild or out of the blue. It's all chalk, Fields, HN, Dowdle, Collins, and White. But I think that's just a really, really strong and really, really good core to go off of where you have two wide receivers and a tight end to switch things up with in terms of getting away from the chalk. You also have the defensive spot where you can pay down for a really cheap defense. We'll get there in a second, but I'll get, as you guys can see, there's a lot to be able to build around in terms of just having a very chalky, cheap core and being able to get different with those wide receiver and tight end spots. But in terms of the wide receivers, obviously George Pickens there with no CD Lamb. Moving on down a little bit more, Garrett Wilson as a bring back with Justin Fields makes sense. Sutton looks really strong there. I really like Chris Godwin Jr. Came back, saw 10 targets. Looks like the main wide receiver for them with no Mike Evans. Moving on down a little bit more, the Los Angeles Chargers wide receivers look really, really good. Obviously, Quentin Johnson looks the safest and the best just because of at the end of last season and going into the season, he's just been the best wide receiver on the Chargers. Unfortunately, because Lab McConkey is there, and I just wish he'd do a little bit better. But Jacoby Myers, 5,600. If there's no Brock Bowers, expect him to get absolutely peppered. So I really like him there in that spot against Indiana. They should be down, so it should be a good passing game script for them. As I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Vlad has a really strong game here against Washington, who has a terrible defense. Obviously, Jalen Waddle, 5,400, wide receiver one, looks really, really good there for that Miami matchup against Carolina. Marvin Harrison Jr., Wandale Robinson, they look really strong. If you want to go a little bit, riskier, Darius Slayton, 4,300. Obviously, you have Jackson Dart and them going against New Orleans. Looks like a great matchup there. I don't mind taking a shot on Jackson Dart as kind of a different contrarian stack option. He's still pretty cheap. You can pair him up with Darius Slayton or even a Wandell, or you can probably do him naked if you wanted to, and then kind of build from there. But yeah, he looks like a good spot, a good candidate. Moving on down a little bit more, I do like the Eagles guys. Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. They've been complaining a lot, and as we know, they usually get fed when they start complaining in the media. Jameson Williams looks fantastic here as just one of those one-off pieces. If you do want to take a shot on a guy, and what should be a great game environment, going against a really terrible defense, he looks fantastic. 4,900. Moving on down a little bit more, nothing really standing out in terms of these cheaper plays. Yeah, I'll mention Chris Kirk once again as wide receiver two there in a good game against the Ravens. Um, Josh Downs definitely viable. Obviously, Michael Pittman Jr. looks strong. That's really it's nothing too crazy there for me in terms of these cheaper plays. I'll mention Renfro is like a cheap value, but I don't think you're gonna get too crazy in terms of that. And then moving on to tight ends, I mentioned no Brock Bowers. So I'm curious to see. Yeah, I think they activated Albert O up and brought him up. They have Ian Thomas. It's just pretty gross. Like I'd really only go to Genty or Jacoby Myers. Maybe take a shot in Trey Tucker if you wanted to, but I don't think there's really any need to kind of get to the tight end situation there for the Raiders if there's no Brock Bowers. But yeah, Trey McBride looks absolutely fantastic there against Tennessee. Really, really like Jake Ferguson going against the Jets there at 4,800. And Tyler Warren. Like all of the top three tight ends look fantastic. If you want to go a little bit cheaper, try to get away from the chalk. I don't mind taking a shot on Zach Ertz there with Jaden Daniels back. Zach Ertz is kind of like a safety blanket for him. He has some decent upside. I will mention it wasn't he didn't pop off, but he did get 7 targets on that last game there against the Bengals. They wanted to get him going a little bit more. So that was nice to see. Like maybe there's, maybe he has a strong game here against Philadelphia, and then maybe the next week he pops. But I just wanted to call that out. He looked okay. They did get him 7 targets, which is something to note. Um, Darren Waller, he only played a couple snaps. He did get heavily targeted, especially in the red zone. So if they do get to the red zone, you want to take a dart throw, you can definitely look to him again. Um, Moving on down a little bit more here, though, to some cheaper guys. We have, Tommy Trimble, saw 8 targets in that last game there. Especially if you think that's going to be a shootout, that wouldn't be too bad of a spot to take a dart throw with him. Or if you want to go with Mason Taylor, kind of had like a slight breakout game there. That last game, 7 targets. You can pair him with Justin Fields. Helps you get a little bit different, especially if you don't go with the Fields and Garrett Wilson stack. Um, and that's really it in terms of the tight end situation there for me. Then, as I mentioned with defense, you can go to the Saints defense there against the Giants. 2,200 looks very, very solid. I don't mind the Tennessee Titans defense at 2,300 against Kyler Murray. Moving up a little bit more now that there's no Lamar. I mean, the Texans D 2,400 against Cooper Rush. An okay backup quarterback, nothing too crazy there, but the Texans defense has actually been pretty strong. So that looks fantastic there. One of the cheapest defenses, 2,400, and then it leaves you with 6,300 left over to target some top tier wide receivers and tight ends. So I think you go with the chalk as of right now, and this is kind of the build that I want to play and kind of build off of. As I mentioned, if you do want to go for some kind of different sort of stacks, as I mentioned, I like Tua. It makes sense. Like if you're gonna play Waddle and you're gonna play Devon HN, it kind of makes sense to play Tua there at 5,500. You can bring it back with Ted McMillan. Moving over to the Detroit game, like I love going to golf here. You can do golf. You could do like if you think Detroit's going to put up like 40 points, you can honestly get to like 3 or 4 of these Detroit Lions guys just because of how efficient they are and how much they spread the ball around. But yeah, I love Gibbs, and I love pairing Jamison Williams with this crew as well, and he can definitely bring it back with um, where do you see Jamar Chase there? Like that looks really solid. Even you can even go to Amon-Ra if you wanted to. I do like this kind of stack. And then where is Mr. Jackson Dart? We could throw him in cheap 5,300. We can throw in Slayton if you wanted to 4,300. Just very very cheap there in terms of a bring back. You could go to Chris Olave, who's still seeing good amount of targets. Obviously, more of a letdown game there against Buffalo. He did make up for it with the touchdown, but one of those guys who'll still get peppered. So there's a lot to like. There's a lot of ways to kind of get different. At quarterback, I think you just go with the chalk, Justin Fields. Or if you wanted to get a little bit different, you can definitely pay down for a guy like Jackson Dart. You can pay up a little bit more for a guy like Dak Prescott, 6,000. Obviously, doesn't have the rushing upside, but a way better passer. So there's a lot to like there in terms of kind of other ways to get different. But as I mentioned, that core leaves you with 3 different areas to kind of build around and get different with in terms of two wide receivers and a tight end. So hope you guys like this quick video. Make sure to like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video. Peace.